I should really get music or something, right? Like actually
It's
make
true.
an intro.
Yeah.
Um All right, let's do this. All right. So, Candace Pedraza is back. We've had her on before. I don't remember if we talked about the Knicks or the WNBA or both. I think it was the Knicks during the
Mm-hmm.
playoffs. That
Yep.
sounds
For
right?
the Pacer series, yeah.
Yes. Candace Pedraza, Knicks Wall, also is it Winsider or W Insider?
Yep.
Winsider.
Winsider.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Fansided. Covers
Yep.
the NBA, covers now football.
Yeah.
So more than just the Knicks. And you can follow her now on Blue Sky, not Twitter anymore. One of the many defectors. I'm trying out Blue Sky also. You can follow me there. It's just my name. And Candace's will have rolling through right here on the ticker. How are you doing? We just saw a big NBA game. We had the Celtics, of course, unsurprisingly, but the Celtics just killed the undefeated streak that the Cavs were on, 15-0. Boston has a parade of threes. The Boston three party is back, and they win by three. Cavs cover, backdoor cover, last second. That was fun for the bettors out there. But let's get into it. 120 to 117, Celtics win. How'd you feel watching this? Do you feel were you surprised at all about how this game eventually turned out?
I guess I was a little bit surprised just because the Celtics have been so good about locking down in late game situations, and so I was a little surprised that they let it get away from them so quickly, especially in that first half. I don't remember the exact deficit that existed after the first two quarters, but it was pretty big. I think they were down definitely double digits by the end of the first half. And obviously, kudos to them. They stormed back. They got it pretty close. Unfortunately, Darius Garland was just completely off the entire game. Donovan Mitchell didn't really wake up until the second half, but I mean, he looked fantastic. Evan Mobley and Jared Allen continue to be amazing this season. Their two-man game is really fun to watch. But the Celtics are the Celtics. They will rain threes. They love chucking threes. A lot of people hate that about their offense, which I'm personally not against it. I mean, if you're hitting threes, I get taking them. You know what I
Can
mean?
we actually talk about this? Can we
Yeah,
actually talk about this?
absolutely. It's
I
like,
like because we don't do the hot takey stuff. Like we're not people who are just chasing shit on social media. So I actually want to like park here for a second because I've had a difficult time with this, right? Because I embrace the data, the analytics that says, and yes, we've been moving toward a 3-point shooting generation, so to speak. We're here emphatically. Missoula ball is a big part of this. It's not just shooting threes for the purpose of shooting threes, although that may feel like it, but there's a method to the madness in terms of creating that space, whipping the ball around, getting to open threes, and making teams have to make a tough decision. Am I going to jump out and sell out to this corner three, or am I going to let a layup go, or potentially a drive and kick to another shooter, and all these different things? The reason why I've had a difficult time with this, though, is because aesthetically, it can get kind of annoying. Like, just from a human standpoint, just watching the product, and it's like, fuck, man, how many threes are we going to see, right? But
yeah.
I also get it from a strategic element. So this doesn't bother you that much. Why is that?
So I understand it from the aesthetic standpoint because it can get like very boring to watch because it's just over and over again. Someone's driving into the paint, everything collapses. They're kicking it out. They're swinging it around until they get somebody as open as possible and they hit the three often. And that's just what happened tonight. And that's what happened in the Knicks game in their season opener. Like they
Good
crushed the
God.
Knicks by doing that. And so it's aesthetically very boring. Like I will admit that. But I don't have like a huge issue with it because I'm like, if you're seeing that you are able to win games, if you hit something like, I think it's like 20 or more three pointers in a contest, you're going to go for that. That's sort of like the easy way to a victory, it seems like, for Boston at this point in the regular season. Do I think that they can rely on that in the postseason? No. I don't think that they're going to be able to just keep chucking threes in the postseason. They're going to see better defenses. The Oklahoma City Thunder come to mind as a team that's very, defense oriented, assuming hypothetically this is like the finals matchup between those two teams. If they end up meeting in the postseason, I don't see that working for Boston. I don't see it working for them against a lot of Western Conference teams, to be honest with you, because that is just an incredibly strong conference. I think right now, though, it's working. I don't see why deter from that. And I personally don't have an issue with it because they're hitting. It's not like they're chucking and missing a bunch of threes. And it's like, wow, you really have nothing else to go to as an offense. But I think a lot of the boredom from it, other than it just being very annoying, comes from the fact that it's just so calculated. Like, you know what they're doing.
Right.
Like, as soon as you see one of them
You
just
can't
driving
stop
into the
it.
paint, the ball is just going to start ping-ponging around and just eventually end up a three. Like, and it's just so calculated down to like the exact, like, everything.
Yeah.
And it is just so purely Missoula ball that it's just like, it's annoying to watch as the opposing team, but I know Boston fans eat it up because they're
Yeah.
like, it's so easy to just watch this team play on offense. Yeah, I don't really have an issue with it. I mean, it sucks that that's how the Knicks got like completely obliterated
That's true. Yeah.
to open the season, but it's one of those things where it's like it happens. And Boston, again, they can't rely on it as a consistent source of their offense. They're going to have to actually drive into the paint sometimes.
Yeah, it's demoralizing, right? To watch sometimes if you're the other side, if you bet against them also.
Hmm.
I think when it comes to the postseason, it's interesting because I wish that we really saw them tested last year, right? Because we didn't get that. And part of it was because, yeah, they were so good, but also just health. And health is a big part of why they were able to just go through the playoffs with relative ease last year. We didn't get to see them against the Knicks in the playoffs. Now, I don't think the Knicks would have won that series, but I do think it would have been at least a pretty deep series. Like, deep to me is six or more. I feel like we could have gotten to six. I actually think if Jimmy Butler were healthy, the Heat could have gotten to six the way that they won one game. And you figure, all right, with Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier and Duncan Robinson at full strength, like those guys were hurt. Duncan Robinson was hurt, but played through it, but barely. Like, he was a shell of what he was doing earlier in that year, where he looked like to some an MIP candidate. And then obviously you have the series rather against Indiana, where Indiana's young. They're in this playoff run with this core for the first time, and they're in a lot of these games late, and they can't close any of them.
Yeah.
Like, and Boston, to their credit, a lot of this was out Kristaps Porzingis, but at the same time, and this year they don't have Kristaps Porzingis at all yet. So I feel like we were kind of robbed of that, but they got their first title anyway. And I just want to see like how good this Cleveland Cavaliers team could be if we could toss to them for a second. Because going into the year, I was very high on them. I was like over 47 and a half wins. This team can be really, really good. I think, and this was my projection before the season started, 2 seed, 50-55 win range. There's potential for more than that, but at least there. And I was like, they could probably get to like the semifinals. And then I still think the Knicks could take them out. This was preseason. Now I'm second guessing that. And it's still very early and we still have to see what happens. And I still think there's room for the Knicks to grow in their defense. But I think Cleveland's legit is the point. And I want to see these two teams, the Celtics and the Cavs, in a playoff series if we can get there. It could really be the Eastern Conference Finals or semifinals, depending on how the bracket shakes out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you and maybe like two or three more people I saw in the preseason were probably the only people that were very high on them, just
Yeah.
because they were one of those teams that didn't make any like big splashes in the offseason, but were relying on their roster coming in with a lot of continuity.
They made one big splash. Kenny Atkinson, head coach.
Oh, well, oh my gosh, of course. Yeah, exactly. And so, which, it's great because JB Bickerstaff, he's thriving in Detroit. So it kind of
Yeah.
worked out for everybody.
Yeah.
But I am so impressed with the way that they sort of bounced back from that, era of the team with JB Bickerstaff leading them, where there was obviously some sort of like, not miscommunication, but it just felt like there was a disconnect between his coaching style and the rest of the team. And now you're getting that previously untapped potential starting to get unlocked, especially when you look at Evan Mobley finally looking like, all right, like you're a legitimate part of this like monster of a starting lineup on both ends of the floor. the question with him is, can you stay consistent throughout the rest of the season and into the postseason as well with that level of play? Same with Jared Allen. We've seen both of them get shut down by Mitchell Robinson multiple times, throughout their seasons together on the floor in the postseason as well. So I'm very curious to see them and how they play against teams with bigs like Robinson in the postseason. But I think that the Cavs have that continuity. They have depth, which is what makes, I think, a lot of the really, really good teams in the NBA to start this season great, is the fact that a lot of teams that just felt like they had enough with what they had going into this season instead of making big trades like the Knicks did, for example, they have really reaped the benefits of that continuity. And I think
Yeah.
the Cavs are a perfect example of that. They stuck to their guns. They said, we will just try to work on fixing the problems that we had from last season into this season. Their defense has been stellar. Their offense has been great. Darius Garland is hitting another level that I didn't know he could hit. Not tonight, but in general,
Yeah.
in general, he is. Had he been how he's been this entire season tonight, I think the Cavs probably leave Boston undefeated still, which might be a spicy take, but I mean, it was a pretty close game. And I think had he just played normally and without, it seemed like, pressure on himself, it would have been a lot more competitive. But yeah, the Cavs are absolutely legitimate. Obviously, I think a lot of Knicks fans are waiting to see what they look like in the postseason to know if they're actually legitimate.
Yeah.
But they have all the makings of a contender. They have great defense, they have depth, they have the star power, and they have excellent guard play. Very, very hard to see who stops them in the Eastern Conference, other than right now, I would say Boston.
Yeah. And Boston didn't have Porzingis, so we didn't see him. We also didn't see Max Strus or Dean Wade or Karis LeVert or Isaac Okoro, all of whom would
Right.
be rotation players for the Cavaliers, and that's not a small thing. I was also impressed that even though there was the 3-point barrage inevitably by the Celtics, because there is one, it feels like every game, they averaged before today 51 3-point attempts per game, which I have a point about that I'm going to make in a second that's kind of out of left field, but like it's nuts. They only got to 41 today. Only. That's
Yeah.
still 10 a quarter,
Yeah.
but only.
Yeah.
22 of 41. Cleveland, despite the fact that they were 10 of 29. So just pure math. You're
Mhm.
talking about a lot more. Like I'm not going to do the math right now off the top of my head. Yeah, I am. 36-point difference in terms of 3-point makes. Advantage Boston. It's always advantage Boston. Cleveland was able to make it a game when it looked like they were going to fold in the third quarter, or a lot of teams would. They made that run. Evan Mobley was great, like
Mhm.
just the whole game, but also in the third quarter, he was spectacular. Donovan Mitchell sort of took it from there. Jared Allen was, doing what he was supposed to do in the paint. I thought that he would have an even better game, but Boston did a good job of kind of limiting his offensive impact, specifically on like the offensive glass, where he only had 3 rebounds. Evan Mobley actually picked up some of that slack. And then ultimately, you needed other guys to make plays. Cleveland had their bench played pretty well, but they didn't go very deep. They had 8 guys, all of whom played 25 plus minutes, except for Sam Merrill, who played 19 and started. So I think Boston plays like a video game. Like when you're young and you're playing 2K and you're playing somebody even younger than you and all they want to do is shoot threes, like, and it's annoying, but they end up going like, I don't know, 12 for 30, which is a good
Yeah.
percentage. And it's like, well, shit, I'm I'm posting you up, old school, right? I'm posting you up. I'm doing all these different things. I'm getting dunks on you, whatever, but you're beating me because you're just jacking up all these threes. I think that's what people feel like when they watch the Celtics. That's what maybe this is just PTSD from my childhood, but I feel like I'm
Yeah.
watching kids play 2K from back in the day where like before we had this 3-point generation, we were trying to do this virtually, and now we play basketball the way we used to play video games, where everything is just fast and it's threes and shit like that. But obviously Boston does it at a much more sophisticated level. And that may make them one of the most interesting teams in the NBA. So we'll segue to the second piece of this. We wanted to talk about interesting teams after the first month of the season. Boston beats Cleveland. Those are two of the more interesting ones. We just talked about them. Candace, I will toss it to you. because you had a couple teams you wanted to touch on.
Yeah.
Which team? I say most interesting teams after this first month. Which team has popped to you the most in terms of intrigue? Not best necessarily, but in terms of intrigue beyond who we just talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I'll name 2 if that's okay.
Sure.
But I know the first one that comes to mind is definitely the Houston Rockets.
Mm,
I watched their game yesterday, I believe, against the Milwaukee Bucks, where they came all the way back in true Bucks of this season fashion. They just allowed them to,
I caught this too.
with
Yeah.
yeah, very little resistance. And it took a game winner, and a really, really well contested inbound from Torian Prince that threw off Sengun, who was trying to catch it and somehow keep his balance and lay it in, which he almost did, and
Yeah.
that was actually a big screw up by the Bucks, like
Yeah.
defensively. And I
Yeah.
don't feel like a lot of people paid attention to it. They were like, "Great job from Prince." I'm like, he was open. Like,
Giannis caught this right away. I think
yeah,
that's why you see after the game he didn't even celebrate. He like huddled with
yeah.
everybody. Like, yo, come on, come on. We got
It
like
was
that. He's like, that shit can't happen again.
Yeah, that was just terrible, terrible, terrible end of game execution. Like that was like a Doc Rivers special in my head. Like that just felt wrong. Like I felt like Milwaukee got away with one there. And yeah, no, but the Rockets are fun and interesting to me, even though they're not maybe winning as many games as they'd like to be, just because I feel like they are truly one of those teams that are like one guy away from being from going from like that mid tier in the Western Conference to
Mhm.
landing within that like 1 through 3 or 1 through 4 slotting right now. Um, Fred VanVleet is like figuring it out. He has a shooting touch back, which is fantastic. Dylan Brooks is always just like the perfect pest to have on the floor alongside VanVleet. So like you're not relying on him too much when it comes to guarding or at least defense. Alperen Sengun is like he is just like
Baby
one
Jokic.
of the more underrated like bigs in the league somehow, which is crazy to me, but he is like baby Jokic.
Yeah.
Very fun to watch. They really crushed the Knicks in their game with him
Yeah.
alone. And that was it. Like all it took was just getting the ball to him in the post and it was over just because Cat struggled to really contain him in that game. And the Knicks are just down so many bigs, but that's a topic for another
Oh, we can get to them if you want. That's why I feel like I talk
another
about them a
day.
lot nowadays, but we can get to them a lot. Also,
Yeah.
like with the Rockets, I just want to add real quick, Dylan Brooks, not just the defense, but as you mentioned, like he's
Yeah.
doing some stuff on offense. He's making about 40% on threes.
Yeah, he's
Like on
yeah,
volume, like on legitimate volume, 5 threes a game.
and I had a feeling that was gonna happen just because of him coming in from, uh, the Olympics. I feel like they relied on him a lot for the 3 ball, and he
They
was
did.
doing at
Yeah.
a decent clip with Team Canada, and so I felt like he and RJ Barrett were gonna come into the season pretty hot, and both of them have. RJ Barrett has been fantastic
He
with
looks really
Toronto
good.
this season,
Yeah.
and that makes me very happy because I always knew he had it. It's
Same.
just yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, with Dylan Brooks, he has been so big for them as well. But I think with the Rockets, they have so many young guys on that team that don't necessarily have like a carved role. And I think that that's going to become an issue, especially as they just get later in this season and maybe closer to the trade deadline. And as Houston starts to figure out like their more solidified, like 1 through 7 or 1 through 8 rotation. Um, I think that especially with, I hate to say it, but I feel like Jabari
Yeah.
has been a little bit like out of sorts with them this season, which is weird because I feel like he was starting to like hit that stride with them last year.
Hmm.
And now he's just kind of like there to me in the games that I've seen. It hasn't been that many, so I will add that addendum. But especially yesterday, it just did not feel like he was asserting himself in any meaningful way down the stretch. Uh, he wasn't. I think he was benched at some point in that fourth quarter too. So it wasn't even like he was impressing Ime Udoka to the point where he had to be on the floor. Um, but it's just like a lot of young guys on that Rockets team that I just feel like are not able to carve themselves out a role yet.
Well, I think with
Yeah.
Jabari Smith, he's in the trade package. First of all,
Yeah.
I think Houston, to your point, is a guy away. We have a comment. I'm gonna get to that in a second because I do actually want to touch on the Lakers. Um,
Yeah.
we have a situation in Houston, we have a problem was right there, but I didn't go for it. We have a situation in Houston right now where like I think there needs to be a consolidation trade at some point if they're going to take that next step because it's felt like they have too many guys and you kind of just need another one who's going to like raise your ceiling, so to speak. There's been rumors about a number of guys in the league, Jimmy Butler being one of them, who I don't think the Heat are going to trade as of now. But if I'm Houston, that's probably one of the guys that I would look at. Even though it's on an expiring contract, you have to figure out the financials in that deal. But like, I wonder if Jabari Smith is going to be in that. Amin Thompson, I think, is somebody who should be in their future plans, and as of recently, is starting to play better after a slow start to the season. I think he could be very, very meaningful to this team and could eventually start. Once the team probably looks a little bit different, he'll have his opportunities as the season progresses because the ebbs and flows of the NBA means guys are going to get hurt. That's just part of the experience. Reed Shepherd, they haven't had to depend on him at all this year. And
Right.
he was getting a lot of rookie of the year buzz too much. I thought that I'm
Mm,
like, man, people are expecting Reed Shepherd to be this rookie of the year. And I'm like, he's not going to play like that big of a role right away. I think he could be a good player, but they
yeah.
haven't needed him, which is a testament to their depth. And I also want to mention Tari Eason because good God,
Yeah.
defensively, I mean, he looks like a guy who could play all defense, like be on the all defensive team. He looks like a guy just like one of these annoying, in a good way, multi-dimensional, versatile forwards who can guard 3+ positions, who if he gives you something on offense too, he could do it efficiently because he's going to shoot a high percentage because he's not somebody who's going to take a ton of shots from the perimeter, although he's been doing a little bit of that too. He's shooting 34%
Hmm.
on threes and about three threes per game. So Tari Eason is also really good. And I like their top, I'm looking at it now, their top 7. So these are the guys that are all playing 12 plus minutes a game. So over 12 minutes a game, actually. Van Vliet, Jalen Green, who we haven't even mentioned yet, is their leading scorer also and super
Yeah.
talented. Long-term fit, we'll see, but they did sign him to an extension. Although when they signed him to that extension, it felt like, oh, that's a contract that they may actually try to piece together in a deal because that's a tradable deal. But we don't have to. We don't. I don't want to shit on Jalen Green. He's been fine.
Yeah.
Some will complain about the efficiency or whatever, but I think he'll come around a little bit. But Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., Amin Thompson, Tari Eason. That's a good talented top 7, but it does feel like there needs to be some sort of consolidation because you still have Reed Shepherd there. You still have, Jay Sean Tate, who's a good player who's not getting minutes, who I
Yeah.
think could be helpful to other teams right now. So Houston's fascinating, and I think they can be legitimate also. And Cam Whitmore too, another talented player who's not really
Right.
playing like that.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, they are very interesting. I think once they clean things up also defensively, they will be a lot more competitive. Like the offense is extremely impressive to start the season from them. It's just managing to win those games, like the Bucks game, like being able to stop Dame from hitting what felt like a wide open layup should have been a little bit harder for him to do,
Yeah.
and they just were not able to like put any resistance on that drive from him. And which was very weird because I felt like they were doing an excellent job in like the few possessions prior to that.
Mhm.
Dylan Brooks was switching on to Giannis and he was preventing him from getting anything easy at the basket, which is a very wild sentence. The fact that Dylan Brooks was guarding Giannis like super successfully for multiple possessions, it just shows how versatile that team can be, especially defensively. And you have the luxury of Dylan Brooks on your team, but it's just not consistent enough. But I think that's just youth. And I think that that's them just like gelling and their chemistry together as a team. But I really love what I've seen from them on offense. It's just a matter of figuring out, all right, well, who is actually this team and who will be on this team, especially by the trade deadline.
Let's quickly hit a few more teams before we get out of here. We'll do the Lakers because I am interested in them. Adam Hurley comments. Thank you, Adam, for the comment. Watch out for the Lakers. They're down Jackson Hayes, Jared Vanderbilt, and Christian Wood. They're still winning. I'm not sure how meaningful Jackson Hayes will be given certain things.
Mhm.
And then we have Christian Wood, who, I mean, we kind of know what he does, but Jared Vanderbilt's the one to me who could like really boost their defense. And with the Lakers right now, they're 9-4, they're third in the Western Conference. And I have been toying around with this idea because like Anthony Davis has looked awesome so far
Yeah.
this year.
Mhm.
And we've sort of been waiting for, I mean, I'm not going to say I've been waiting for this, because 31-11 was not what I was waiting for. This is more than I
Right.
probably could have ever asked for Anthony Davis, but he's supremely talented. And I think people have been frustrated with him because sometimes he doesn't play at the level that he's been playing at. But this year, knock on wood, also, I will literally do that,
Mhm.
wooden table. He's healthy. That's a big part of this. And he looks incredible. Like, just watching him just without fear, taking it to guys, using his strength. Clearly been in the weight room, has bulked up over the course of his career too, which, slender guys tend to do in the NBA when they're serious and want to be inside scorers. But he looks great. The Lakers look interesting. There's always going to be trade rumors around this team and like upgrades. And, now there's been retraction on early D'Angelo Russell rumors, but I feel like because of his deal, he's habitually going to be somebody in those deals, those rumored deals. Austin Reeves has looked better. I think that's encouraging.
Yeah.
This is the Austin Reeves that I expected for more of last year. I didn't think he had a bad year, but I think some people expected more. He's been doing really well this year. Um, you have Rui Hachimura, who, he's one of their main glue guys. Like, this is an interesting team to me. I still feel like they're a guy or two short, need to fortify this rotation a little bit. Gabe Vincent was really good in Miami. It just hasn't worked out for me with the Lakers at this point. Dalton Connect looks really good,
Yeah.
as one of the better rookies I've seen. Like, he impresses me often. Right. I don't know if I'm just like coming in with low expectations, but I saw him in college and I didn't think he was going to be this right away. Where are you at with the Lakers? I guess is my question.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, again, like you said, it all depends on health. As long as they're this healthy for most of the season and heading into the postseason, I do not see a world where they leave like that 3 to 5 slot in the Western Conference. I
That's
don't
interesting.
think, yeah, I really don't. I mean, if Anthony Davis is playing to this level for most of the season, if he's able to stay healthy, and if you have LeBron just continuing to somehow put up the numbers
I
that he's
can't
putting
believe
up, like damn near averaging like a triple double, and is like 40 something years
he's
old.
gonna be 40 next month.
It's unbelievable. I love that everyone loves it. It is ridiculous.
Yeah,
I love it. I eat it up because I love LeBron James,
I can't
and
believe it.
the like ridiculousness that he is as a player. But if he remains at this level as well, or keeps playing at that level, I think even with these injuries, but especially to Jared Vanderbilt, like you mentioned,
Yeah,
they will be coasting. Honestly, like not coasting. The Western Conference is extremely difficult. Everyone in the Western Conference who is at least in that like 1 through 6 or even like 1 through 8 seeding right now is competitive. Um, but I do think that as long as you have that tandem of LeBron and AD healthy for most of the season and playing at this level, it's very difficult to write them off. The only teams that I could see them struggling against in the postseason are the ones that they've continue to struggle against in the postseason. So Denver, especially,
yeah,
just not being able to figure out the puzzle that is Jokic, or well, I feel like it's just been Denver, honestly.
yeah. I mean,
Like,
I don't feel great about them potentially playing Oklahoma City. I don't feel great about anybody potentially playing Oklahoma City if they're
I
healthy.
yeah. And I had this argument last season. I remember this because Anthony Davis was healthy when I was having this argument last season. And I was like, there's no way that Chet Holmgren is going to stop Anthony Davis in the postseason. I did not feel confident in that. I also just felt like with OKC's inexperience at that point in the postseason, compared to at least LeBron's and AD's as well, the Lakers had the edge on that front, just positionally. But obviously that did not even come to fruition. Like it just did not live up to that expectation. If that happens again this year, I would feel a little bit more pause about OKC and LA in terms of I would feel fear for the Lakers against this OKC team because they are so switchable on
Hmm.
defense.
And
So
your
it's
boy's
not
over
just
there
Cat.
now too. Once
I
you
know,
got,
and
he hasn't
Isaiah
played yet.
Hartenstein,
Isaiah
he's
Hartenstein hasn't played yet, but he will.
yeah, very underrated rim protection from Hartenstein always. I feel like even Knicks fans still underestimate just how good of a rim protector he was. Like it was a luxury
We're seeing
to
it
be
now.
able to say, all
Yeah.
right, Hartenstein's our starter. We have Mitchell Robinson on the bench. We're good. Like exactly, we're seeing the effects of that now. Cat, excellent scorer.
Dot dot dot. However,
However, everyone is running into the paint against the Knicks, and that's why their defensive rating is not good.
should we get into the Knicks right now? Should we just
We
do it?
could, we could,
We
but no,
want to hit a couple other
yeah,
teams, but I mean, we can't not talk about the Knicks.
of course,
You're at the Knicks Wall. I'm covering them at the Post.
yeah,
We're New York got game with Dex. He has the main show, and then we do the live streams every week, which we're planning on having you on. Obviously, I think he's already told you that, but
yeah,
we got to talk about the Knicks briefly before we wrap up on maybe another team or two. How worried are you about this defense? It's just basically my main
yeah.
question because I feel like there are problems to sort of mitigate the flooding in the basement a little bit, but I don't think they'll be able to like plug all the holes until maybe Mitchell Robinson gets healthy or they make a trade.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. There's there's nothing they can do until Mitchell Robinson is back and you gauge how he looks because this is yet another leg injury for him coming off an ankle surgery. Uh, how explosive is he? Is he really even able to like provide that same level of rim protection that he was able to a year ago, even in the postseason against Joel Embiid? Um, I worry about that. If he is able to come back and he looks even like 85% the way he did to start this season compared to last, I think they'll be fine. The defense will find itself within that. If he isn't, that's when I think the Knicks are going to start to very seriously consider packaging him um, and figuring out a way to get just a very like base level rim protector. It doesn't even have to be somebody who scores a ton, just somebody to take that load off of Cat because as much as he's trying very hard to like play better defense, it is just not pretty to watch him contest so many layups at the rim and everyone just knows to just like shoot around him and he's not gonna
Hmm. It's
there's no resistance on this other side.
I can't
Um
count. I can't count how many times I've seen like guards are actively like work like come here. You know what I mean? Like every
yeah,
time they get the switch, I've seen this so many times. Guard will get the high screen, they'll get the switch on Towns,
yeah.
push the ball downfield a little bit, toss it to the big, or just toss it straight to the corner. But sometimes they'll toss it to the big, they'll toss it to the corner if they're like a good passing big, like a Nikola Vucevic, for example,
Mhm.
or even Onyeka Okongwu to some degree. But like this was happening, and then OG Anunoby or Mikal Bridges feel like they don't trust Karl-Anthony Towns fully by himself because if it's kind of a two-on-one situation, they're overhelping, and then the shooter's open from the corner, wide open three, boom, and like this has been the way to carve up the Knicks defense. Like you couldn't get away with that before because of their
Yeah.
switchability and because their bigs could survive on switches. And Towns, like the issue that I have is that he's never been a guy to really like solve this problem when he's the five. When he's next to
Mhm.
Rudy Gobert, so potentially when he's next to Mitchell Robinson, you can get different results. But now that he's kind of by himself on an island and he's going to be attacked, like he'll get 30 and he might give up 30. Like that's just kind of where we're at now. And
Yeah.
all star on the offensive end, but defensively, like I have concerns.
100%. And I think that, yeah, if Mitchell Robinson is able to come back soon, um, the defense will look night and day, especially with Precious coming back. It seems like soon, much sooner. It seems like he might be back on this road trip, actually. But Precious is not a five that you slot next to Cat, in my opinion. He's great off the bench, and I think that given how he looked in the preseason, he will be a really good scoring pop for the bench. Um, but I don't love the idea of him playing the 5. He's
Yeah.
another one that's just, he's a great defender, it seems, that the Knicks have, like, tapped or gotten that out of him.
Sure.
He can't protect the rim the way that Mitchell Robinson could, or,
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately, Isaiah Hartenstein could, but that's over. I yeah, I it really does just rely on Mitchell Robinson, which is a very scary thought to have because I don't think the Knicks even can rely on Mitchell Robinson at this point in their relationship with each other, because it just seems like between, like, his social media posts kind of always being, like, super cryptic for no reason, and then his name also always coming up in, like, trade proposals.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's sort of, like, inevitable that he will be
Yeah.
moved on from. I just don't know what teams will be willing to take him on. It would have to be a team that's very desperate for a starting 5, but maybe not necessarily a team that's, like, contending.
Well, you always have to take into account, this is how I think about this. You always have to take into account who is going to have an injury situation, a hole that they suddenly need to plug out of nowhere. Like, unfortunately, we've already had multiple ruptured Achilles, 2 of them on the Pacers, because I think both James
Right.
Wiseman and Isaiah Jackson at center, they lost 2 guys who were going to be like in the plans in terms of backing up at center, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, like, got to do something else.
Right.
Like, so those things are going to pop up, and that's important because as we get to like December 15th, when certain trade eligibility restrictions are lifted, same thing with
Right.
January 15th, and then suddenly we're at the deadline, which is already less than 3 months away. Like, there's a lot that is going to change between now and then. So I think they will be able to find something for Mitchell Robinson. They need to score. The other 2 things that I want to point out with the Knicks where I'm concerned, and then we'll move on from them. One, the scoring off the bench is inconsistent, and that's worrisome to me. A lot is being put on Deuce McBride, who I think is fantastic, but like, you need a real bench unit. So I think if and when the Mitchell Robinson deal, or it could be somebody else, but when the Mitchell Robinson deal does come, like, you have to be able to maybe get 2 rotation players out of that, or just somebody who's going to be steady, multi-dimensional offensively, come off the bench and just give you more of a scoring punch. And then the other thing is, Jericho Sims has been on the receiving end of a lot of faces like that you just saw Candace make.
Yep.
Basically, like, I think
Yeah.
I think with Jericho Sims, and I asked Dex this, like, do you think Jericho Sims is replaced by Ariel Hawk-Purdy in the rotation by Christmas? And he says yes. And what I always explain to Knicks fans is Jericho Sims is going to get the shot because he's on the last year of a deal, and you need to see if he's worth like the 3 for 11 that Deuce McBride got, or like a 2 for 7, 2 for 8 to keep him on the rotation, team friendly deal, and whatever the case may be. And they already converted Hawk Purdy to a standard contract, which tells me that the clock is ticking, and they're going to give Hawk Purdy a look. It's a really small thing, but
Yeah.
if your backup center can provide rim protection in Ariel Hawk Purdy, because Jericho Sims is kind of just a rebounder
Right.
with hops. But Hawk Purdy seems like he could be a little bit better, and I think maybe he helps solve this problem a little bit. But he's also a rookie, was a late second round pick, and like, I don't know how much you can actually rely on him in a real way yet.
Yeah. I love the idea of Jericho Sims developing into this really reliable bench big. Um, but the issue with him is that he is just so one dimensional. All he really can do is rebound. And even then, he does get boxed out a lot more than he should
Yeah.
for someone with his athleticism and his strength. He gets boxed out a ton, where it ends up just being tip outs that are 50-50 balls. I feel like the Knicks win most of those, but it's still not what you want out of him specifically. I feel like, and it's so unfortunate because I feel like last season, and I remember the specific game, it was the game against the Brooklyn Nets. And it was that comeback with that like really electric, like alley oop to Julius Randle from Jalen Brunson. And it was a great game. The Knicks ended up winning. But in that first quarter from Jericho Sims, he had like 3 block shots or something like that, like 3 or 4. And I was like, oh my God, like he's turning a corner. Like this is it. he's locked in, like he has his timing. This is fantastic. Never did that again. And it just confused the hell out of me because I'm just like, what happened? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, and Nick Claxton isn't some like slouch of a center. Like, you were doing a pretty good job against a pretty decent big.
Yeah.
And he just never did it again.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I wish he could unlock just a little bit more consistency on defense, especially, but between the foul trouble that he gets into and just the inability to like really assert himself in the paint, I think he is another one that like his clock is definitely ticking with the team, unfortunately, which sucks because center is really what they need, and he has just not been able to step up.
Give me another team before we get out of here that you really want to talk about.
Really want to talk about the other team I was thinking about was the Warriors, just because I was not high on them at all. To start the season. I was like, well, this is, just like a fun, figuring stuff out year for them. Steph's like winding down in his, the last couple of years with them. Like, let's just see what happens. I did not at all anticipate them being as good as they have been on defense, especially. I think they have the number 1 defense in the league, if not top 3.
They're close. They're not 1, but they're close. They're up there. They were 1 at one point. And Draymond Green looks like a depoy candidate again. Like,
it's insane to me, and it's specifically him. Like, the fact that he's become this like defensive anchor again for the team, and so many young players on this team. You have like Trace Jackson Davis, you have Brandon Podziemski, and I apologize if I just butchered his last name. Not that I think that he's watching. I love the way that this bench has developed from just a couple of like really fun young guys from last season into, you guys are like genuine pieces of this rotation around Draymond and around Steph that can make a difference off the bench on both ends of the floor. I think I had seen like a very wild graphic during their Dallas game, I think last week, and the bench scoring disparity between them and Dallas was ridiculous. It was like they had scored like 60 points off the bench or something like that to Dallas's like 10. And that's just a consistent pattern for them. And so the fact that they, obviously Steph is still putting up another one that's putting up absurd numbers despite starting to get up there in age, despite him still playing at that caliber, at that all-star caliber.
Right.
Like, they don't have to put everything on his shoulders. And I think that's what's going to take them very far. I don't know how far. Again, I worry about them against teams like OKC. I don't know how they would fare because OKC is another very deep and talented unit. But Golden State is definitely my sleeper pick for one of the 2 like Western Conference Finals teams. Just because obviously the postseason experience, and just knowing what it takes to get that deep in the playoffs and their depth. Those 2 things really pop out. And yeah, I feel very wild for even feeling like they can make it that far. But they just seem like one of the very few genuinely cohesive teams on both ends of the floor in the NBA right now, and especially in the Western Conference.
You mentioned their bench. These are the guys who have regularly come off the bench for them this season. It's not even getting to their starting lineup, but Buddy Hield, Brandon Podziemski, you mentioned, Jonathan Kuminga. D'Anthony Melton is now hurt with an ACL sprain, but I think his comeback when he does play is not going to be like, it shouldn't be overlooked. He's a meaningful player. And also Kyle Anderson, Moses Moody, and Kevon Looney are in that mix as well. We've seen cameos from Lindy Waters, who like has really popped off a couple of times already this season. And Gary Payton Jr. still gets some run as well, which is Gary Payton II, I should say. Gary Payton Jr. is another Gary Payton, from what I understand. But yeah, that could get kind of confusing for people. They run a very deep rotation. It's worked so far. they're another team who could probably use a consolidation trade. I don't know who's going to be in that.
Yeah.
But like I've liked the Buddy Hield fit a lot. That's something that I thought was
Yeah.
going to work. I was worried, after seeing how he sort of flamed out in Philadelphia, but I've come to realize that maybe they're the team we should finish up here with. But I've come to realize that Philadelphia is a team that just does that to people. Like,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you look at him, Al Horford, PJ Tucker, which I mean, maybe I'll cut them some slack there. But
I mean,
yeah.
Spoelstra got the last good season out of PJ Tucker, and that was one of his best. But like since then, he hasn't been the same. PJ shouldn't have left, but he took the money, so I get it. He's super, super rich now. Um, Jonathan Kuminga, I thought he would pop more, but he has had some games and still has had some moments, and I think that his
Yeah.
production is going to elevate. It has been a little bit better lately, but I'm still like I'm a Jonathan Kuminga. Like I've turned on him. I'm a Jonathan Kuminga guy now. I kind of wasn't before, like in the
Yeah.
beginning, or I wasn't sure how to feel. I shouldn't say I wasn't. I was just like, I'm not really sure, but
Right.
he can play. And then obviously you have the main guys. You have Steph Curry, you have Draymond Green, you have Andrew Wiggins, who's been better lately. Finally,
Hmm.
like a bit better. Andrew Wiggins last season, if you remember, wasn't always great.
Yeah.
Was rarely
Hmm.
great, but like this is a good team. I don't like the Western Conference is so all over the place for me. Like um there's still a lot of other teams like worth mentioning that obviously we're not going to spend all this time on it, but like Oklahoma City's number one, Golden State's number two right now, the Lakers, the Rockets, who we've already talked about. Phoenix is an interesting team just from the standpoint of like how are they going to match up with Golden State?
Yeah.
That's a playoff series I would sign for. Like if Golden
Hmm.
State and Phoenix is the 4 or 5, that would be
Yeah.
incredible. Mike
100%.
Budenholzer versus Steve Kerr. Also, that's such a
Hmm.
dorky thing I just did.
Yeah.
Like I shouted out the coaches first instead of going right to Steph and Kevin
Specifically.
Durant. Yeah, this is what a dweeb. And then you still have Denver. Like I don't know if Denver's gonna figure this shit out, but
Yeah.
Nikola Jokic is still the best player in the world. He's out right now for personal reasons. I'm not gonna say what they are, but they're out there. Nothing
Hmm.
bad. Nothing bad. Actually,
Oh
really
yeah,
good.
it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But he needs to do a lot, and I worry about like I hope this isn't the year he gets hurt. But there's Julian Strother, our Puerto Rican brother, trying to hold
Yeah.
it down over there. We'll see. I
Hmm.
think he's gonna pop still. I think Peyton Watson could. Christian Brown has, but they're relying on young guys. Minnesota, that fit looks clunky as hell. Um,
Yeah.
who is surprised by that? We know Julius Randle very well, and
Yes.
he's an all-star, all NBA level player in the regular season. It has been, but this is not a good fit for him. It just isn't. And then we'll see what happens with the Memphises and Sacramento's and Dallas. I still think it's going to be good. They're 7-7 right now, but that's basically the Western Conference. The Western Conference is a lot of fun. Um, just quickly on Philadelphia because I mean
Hmm.
we'll wrap on this.
Yeah.
Joel Embiid got called out by Tyrese
Hmm.
Maxey. Reportedly, there was a players only meeting that Kyle Lowry reportedly called. Tyrese Maxey called out Joel Embiid for being late to things, and then this led to this discourse online, which some of it probably fair. They're coddling him and those things, and him being Joel Embiid. And you have this situation where Philly is 2-11, and I feel great about. Hey, I'm smart. I bet Philadelphia at plus what would 320 whatever it was to make the play
Hmm.
in. But like, I don't even know if they're gonna do that the way they've been looking so far. So I didn't think that they deserved all the credit that they got. I also didn't think it would look this poorly. And granted, Joel Embiid's been out, but like 2-11, Candace, 2-11, they're
Yeah.
right there with Washington, who I said before the year is not going to win 20 games, and they still might not. But Philly's two and
Yeah.
11. They're at the Wizards' pace, Candace.
Yeah. No, and it's funny because I like the way Knicks. I have to put everything in like a Knicks fan lens, and the way Knicks fans are talking about the Knicks, you would think that they're 2-11, but the
Yeah,
Knicks
yeah.
are figuring stuff out. Like
Fourth
they
in the
have like
East.
one of like the best offenses we've seen from them like ever.
Yeah,
Philly is genuinely floundering. Like that they are the definition of the word. And I'm shocked because first of all, in that report, what really stood out to me was the fact that players were asking the coaching staff to coach them harder, when I feel like Nick Nurse was
Right.
hired specifically to be that guy and, like,
Yeah.
to be this, like, I'm gonna really get, like, everybody into shape. I'm gonna instill this, like, tough culture for Philly, and you're asking him to coach you harder. That's a
Yeah.
terrible look. Um,
Or a masochistic look.
yeah, and then on top of that, then you have a potential Rookie of the Year candidate in Jared McCain doing everything in his power to try to win games for
Yes.
Philly.
Yeah.
It's just not enough, despite him putting up ridiculous numbers and
Yeah.
his few starts with the team.
Yeah.
Tyrese Maxey, the fact that he has to be the one to call out Joel Embiid, who's his veteran, for showing up late to practices and to other team related events, is such a bad look.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just have Paul George floating around.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget that Paul George is even on the Sixers, to be completely honest with you. Like, he cooked the Knicks very low key in that one game, but like it was such a obvious loss that it was just all garbage time points to me from him. But he's had very little impact. Their bench has been a nothing burger for them this season. Obviously, they've been dealing with injuries to, of course, Joel Embiid and Paul George. So they've been unable to get that chemistry going.
And Tyrese Maxey now,
And Tyrese
unfortunately.
Maxey.
Yeah.
And
But it looks like he'll
so
be back soon.
I don't see, or I don't feel like this like miraculous run coming for them without some sort of change. I don't know what that change would be. Paul George was the change that I think they were expecting to kind of put things into overdrive in terms of, we have a current contention window. Let's actually try to attack it, as opposed to like letting it close on ourselves. And unfortunately, I think it's closing pretty quickly on them. Especially just given the fact too that with Joel Embiid, the biggest question mark all the time with him is like, how many games can you really get from him in a season? I think his injuries just continue to get worse and worse, especially his knee injuries, and his lower body is just completely falling apart.
Yeah.
And I'm not laughing at that. I'm just laughing at just like how tragic it is, like that his career just is starting to hit that like sad decline, similar to that of like Kawhi Leonard, in my opinion, where it's just
Yeah.
like, we've seen what your best looks like, and I don't think we're ever going to get that again. And I think Philly has yet to accept that. But the coddling part, I definitely see. And I think that's a part of it. I think that's a part of why they're kind of letting him do him to start this season. But it is a terrible look.
He signed an extension. The extension is it's a lot of money. All right, 51 million this year, 55, 58, 62, and this is 27, 28. And then the 2028-29 season, there's an option there for $68 million. And he will be turning 35 years old. I'm not sure he's going to be like an NBA player at that point. Like, I can't even confidently bet on that. So, I mean, shout out to Daryl Morey and the bang up job that the front office has done there in Philadelphia, that they're getting a lot of credit for. Like, I think at the NBA level, just in general, we're just giving out too many extensions, like, that don't need to be. Like, I understand you want to like do a favor for a guy, an agent, and things of that nature, but I think sometimes you just got to like play out your contract. That's not very like progressive of me in that regard. It's not really, that doesn't reflect who I am as a person. But you know, but just philosophically, I mean, come on, Joel Embiid. He's an amazing player when he's healthy, but god damn it, he just always gets hurt. He's 30 years old now. We tend to forget he missed the entire first 2 seasons of his career, and he also played 31 games the first season we saw him, and still almost won Rookie of the Year because the rookie class was so bad in the 2016-17 season. But 31 games. So the first 3 years of his career, he played 31 games. He never played 70 games in his career. He definitively won't this year. Like it's not going to happen. The most
Right.
he's played was 68, and that was a few years ago. He's been in the 60s, and it's been honestly healthier than I thought he was going to be for the most part, but always tends to get hurt at the end of the year. This time he's hurt at the beginning. I just don't really see it. Paul George doesn't look great. Quietly, he's in his mid 30s. They gave him a big ass contract, and like,
Yeah.
he's got an injury history too. Tyrese Maxey, I'm not worried about. He hasn't been super efficient, but like, how can you like that's not really his fault
Right.
necessarily. And I think with the Sixers in general, they just got way too much credit for what they did in the offseason. I didn't think the team they built around these guys was going to be very good. And I think at full strength, they'll obviously be better. But like, when Caleb Martin, who I saw a lot of him in Miami, if he's your second leading rebounder, yeah, that's gonna be
Not
a
good.
problem. Like,
Hmm.
it's gonna be an issue. I love Gershon Yabusele and what he was doing in France, but ultimately, like, he's not going to change your fortune immediately. So I don't know if the front office is going to get more aggressive and make another move. I don't think they're going to sell the farm, but like I can't even get my mind to think about what does a Joel Embiid trade look like? Who could you even like? How with that contract I just read you, I would have no interest if I'm anybody else. Same goes for Paul George, and then Tyrese Maxey. He's your future, and Jared McCain might be also at this point. Like that might be your future backcourt. Run with it, but yeah, it doesn't look great. Milwaukee has some issues too, but we don't have time for that. But I think Milwaukee has more solves there. Phillies. I mean, Joel Embiid's already missed 10 games this year.
Yeah.
Like,
It's yeah, it has hit the point of no return, I think, for them. But I am very curious to see what they do because I don't know off the top of my head what their draft assets and like what that's looking
they don't
like. I
have a
don't know
lot. They don't
what
have a lot.
apron they're in at this point. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the CBA. All I know is that the Knicks have like manipulated it to the upteenth
Yes,
degree.
yes, they have. To the
But
point of getting G League rights to Matt Ryan and Landry Shamet so that they could just
which
get
is
one of them at least. And
so
Matt
absurd.
Ryan's on the team getting minutes now.
Very, very absurd work. But
The best the
yeah,
front office has been in my lifetime for the Knicks. Seriously. It's ridiculous.
I I, I think Philly's gonna have a very difficult time accepting that the process is hitting its end and it ended in no, actually serious postseason appearances. Uh, I don't know. Like I feel weird about it because it's like I feel like I shouldn't be counting out Joel Embiid's ability to come back because like we've seen him find ways to lock in despite having injury, like we saw in the Knicks series. Although he was doing a lot in that series that I
He
wasn't a fan of.
knee injury, Bell's Paul. Like I can't imagine it. But that's part of it too. It's like it just happens. It just keeps happening to him. It's a big low. And then on top of that, it's like look at what they have to navigate. Like the Eastern Conference has to get its shit together, but there's not like these teams aren't bad. Like Indiana is 6-8 right now. They'll get it together. Cleveland, we talked about. Boston, we talked about. Orlando is great defensively. The
Yeah,
Knicks are coming around, and they're not even in bad shape right now comparatively. Um, Atlanta and Miami are going to be in that sort of like 2B, 3A tier, with the possibility of jumping up depending on what happens with some of the guys on their respective rosters, because they have interesting profiles that can cause Philly problems. Miami already has done that in the past. And
right.
then, there's Milwaukee. So, yeah, I think Philly's screwed. All right, we can end it there. Sorry, Philadelphia. You're probably not even watching this anyway. That's Candace Pedraza. Follow her work at Blue Sky, Knicks Wall, Fansided, Winsider, and anywhere else that you could find Candace Pedraza. Basically, thanks for joining once again.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we'll be back on the channel very soon. We have more boxing to talk about pretty soon. Not this week because I mean, ain't no fights this week that are like worth mentioning. But if you like the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, Amanda Serrano, and Katie Taylor stuff, there'll be more with big fights coming very soon. And